Essay 2. Based on the question number 3, whose instructions indicated to review the page number 478 of the text of Magnin 1740, where he speaks about some of the customs of the inhabitants of the Amazonian jungle and discuss about this section, where is mentioned the very different pigments and the variety of the indigenous accessories which men and women used to place on their bodies as an adornment and signals of beauty. Following there is a short comparison about the way of relators in Magnin texts used to describe these customs and what the author Amy Butler's 2006 text indicate about the finding done by Europeans of cochineal pigments and autochthon American inks used to extract from it and a kind of red ink. In the text of Magnin 1740, we can find a very complete report and description about the characteristics of the Amazonian territories that by those times were still part of the Quito province. Their inhabitants, at their different and uncommon way of living, were compiled by Jesuits who were at the service of the Imperia and were sent to America and particularly here to introduce Christian religion and convert native people to this religious conviction for his soul's salvations. It is hard to imagine from our understanding and actual way of living how difficult it should be for young European priests to come to these savage regions and try to extend their philosophy in such complicated scenery and even try to be fair and reasonable in their appreciations. The question to answer in the following work will be how the Jesuits describe and compare the native ethnic characteristics of being with the concept of European being, what from they symbolized power and how this power was expressed by the use of different accessories in their customs by the observations of the inhabitants' code. But before to go directly to answer this area under discussion, it is important to remember one of the matter the author Saldaña begins his text with. Certainly, he has a belief about non-Western sciences has ever existed, and then compare the differences of a number of centuries from the science advances that Europe reached versus what was found here, after the first conquerors came by 1492. Saldaña condemned the fact that most of judgments done to our native cultures were based first in the ethnocentrism that consists in judging another culture based only in the standards and the values of their own culture. Actually, in the text of Magnin, it can be found the limitation from comparing the way of Amazonian cultures living in a contrast of the common Europeans' way of living. The description of some particular customs done by Magnin 1740, especially on page 478, were related about how the natives like to adorn their bodies using very different ways. For example, achi of juice, a vegetable of red color, of jaguar juice, another vegetable for black color. To paint some parts of their body like head, hands, feet, even teeth, were ways to differentiate one tribe from another. Other practice was the way they used to wood tied to their heads to get a moon head form, the particular way to introduce wooden pieces in their nose, superior lips, and ears to completely form them by expand the skin around these devices were typical way to dress and adorn their bodies. For the conservative and moral priests' way of living, it should be really shocking to try to teach inhabitants, and especially women, how to use linen to cover their naked bodies, considering the fact that all the native ones used to exist totally naked, without a minimum embarrassment or having any prejudice for their naked style. In this way of describing these habits of trend for these inhabitants of the jungle, it is important to compare how Butler, 2006, described the discovery of cochineal pigments done by Europeans. In these both cases, European and American, the developed classes of important cities and the inhabitants of the jungle, the red pigments were used to reinforce styles and way to dress or adorn, with the only difference that our local cultures were observed and made judgments upon, but not based in scientific values or concept of difference in cultures, but using these facts, maybe not totally with fundament or based on anthropology concepts, but only associating them with a way of the observer's own understanding, which is not essentially complete and fair. Amy Butler, 2006, in her text The Perfect Red, explains how by the 15th century hundreds of thousands of Europeans made a living from textiles by the extant fashion and trendy habit to use and get the best varieties and long-last quality of color red. Some merchants discovered and took the cochineal pigment from America to Europe and starting a complete industry that involved signing humble shepherds to greater merchants. It was a big news, Butler said in her text The Perfect Red, when conquistadors found the Aztecs selling an extraordinary red dye stuff in the great market Mexico by 1519. We know that these Ghana cochinilla were took from America to Spain and then spread the whole Europe, where the red color was a very important tradition that means power, wealth, and distinction, and it seems to have the same appealing qualities all over the world, no matter what kind of human civilization we are talking about. Again, taking Butler's words, the association of color and rank was reinforced by sumptuary laws that decreed that each level of society was allowed to eat, drink, and wear. For sure, this conception can be associated with the fact that so many Amazonian civilizations used to cut their hair and paint their heads in red, would call the attention of the foreign civilized priests who could not accept that women and men used to walk totally naked and not paying attention to this fact, but try to use feather and leaves to cover some small part of their bodies. These kind of singularities were reported with astonishment, and even some other facts like the customs to eat human meat or drink human blood, which easily could be associated with the most primitive savage conditions, and maybe for other reasons, the feeling of superior souls arising from the European visitors to our lands could be justified according to their life concepts and codes at the time to describe and judge our native civilizations as inferior and a kind of second grade of humankind. Nevertheless, the civilization or science, even the anthropology, could not be understood and applied in their complete concept without a deep understanding that those cultures who have decided not to be contacted and civilized have their own codes to take from Mother Nature only what they need to survive without accumulated richness and power, in total opposition with the Occidental advice and civilization culture, where development means to acquire deep, rich needs and satisfy their accumulation needs has been the center of their philosophy. Certainly the Jesuits have another mission, not to accumulate richness and power, but maybe, deep inside their ecclesiastical order, the knowledge accumulation and presumption to be the preeminent and be wise could compare with this desire to reach notoriety instead or reach some wealthy benefits the rest of the Occidental culture still has and that rules our world.